And we are live. This is Dark Journalist. It's great to be here with everyone. It's already a great crowd. And we are just doing kind of a quick update with you here tonight on a few things that have popped up, and also to go over some of the really kind of extraordinary things we've been covering on the JFK National Security Action Memorandum that has been activated by President Trump as of November 18th. And how does that play into the long strategy that President Trump is playing now? This is kind of a very interesting period and interval that we're in. So we're going to do a short update on that tonight. I'll try to grab a few questions right out of the chat here. Of course, we don't have the lovely Olivia with us tonight because this is just kind of something I wanted to get out there before all the craziness with your holidays kick in, but I hope all that's going to go real well. I know they've been trying to keep it down and sort of keep us in this strange, COVID Thanksgiving world. But it doesn't seem to be working. Actually, there's a record number of people traveling, and some of these really petty, governors and states like Newsom and Gretchen Whitmer, that whole thing seems to be going down hard. People are really sick of it, and that's here or it's overseas, whatever it happens to be. But we're spending a little time here tonight to get the flavor of what exactly has been happening. And it's been quite fascinating. As we reported on Friday, President Trump, through the acting Secretary of Defense, Christopher Miller, activated JFK's National Security Action Memorandum 57. And there at the ceremony was Ezra Cohen Watnick. Now, Ezra is very interesting, and he being the acting Undersecretary of Defense Intelligence. The combination of those two being quite sort of quickly elevated to their positions as soon as the election was over, and we know it goes on, and I have a few updates for you here on it. But one of the really fascinating things I think that took place was that as soon as the original voting was done, Trump comes out and he doesn't really say much about the election, but he fires Esper, who was the defense secretary. Now, as I've gone over on this program, during the summer, we had a switch out of the continuity of government commander, who's also known as the combatant commander. And it's quite interesting because the combatant commander is someone who is the head of NORTHCOM, and he is the head of North American Aerospace, so he handles NORAD, and he is also the continuity of government commander. So he holds all three positions. And they had someone in there named General O'Shaughnessy, and they retired him early, actually, at 54. And it was interesting because he hadn't been elevated that long himself. I think he got the position in 2018. Now, there's been a lot of moves around continuity of government, and Professor Peter Dale Scott really dug into this and put it on the radar for us so we understood what it was. In short, continuity of government is a secondary government that's set up in the event of an emergency. And originally it was meant to be a nuclear emergency. In the 80s and 90s, that got changed to just any emergency where they could use it. And it basically usurps any sense of the normal government as we would know it. So completely just, off the hook. And it's interesting when we look at it because continuity of government is the kind of thing where slowly but surely you can see it has been used, and the players have been all involved in some of the real deep events of history. But we certainly could see it used during 9/11. I mean, this was crucial because in 9/11, we saw the players themselves, Rumsfeld and Cheney, who actually had something to do with setting it up and had a lifelong involvement with it, activating it on September 11th. And we've been living under that September 11th Emergency Act, which actually was enacted on September 14th. And every year, the president enacts it himself by signing off. So it's quite interesting when you think of it that way. And that's every president. That's, if we think about it, W. Bush, Obama, and Trump all signed those NDAAs with the Emergency Act in it. Because what happens when you give up emergency powers, and it's a good lesson for us, is you don't get them back. That's just the nature of the beast. But we're going to talk about that a little bit. What I want to do is highlight that, the National Security Action Memorandum that got activated was on the books And it was something that President Kennedy had laid out all the way back there in 1961 after trying to figure out the many different ways when he got into office to get around the Central Intelligence Agency, which had pulled a major amount of power unto itself and was acting as an independent government with its own Air Force and own covert ops, and really was running everything, the CIA and the National Security Council. They were running rings around the White House. And the White House was really getting out of the loop. There's one period there in the 50s where Eisenhower has a stroke and the CIA just basically running the world. And I think that they want to get back to that kind of thing with Biden, with just have kind of a figurehead and see if they can run rings around the figurehead. And there's a lot of things going on with the election. They're trying to just get us to go right into this president-elect Biden mode, but there are actually legal motions in 5 states that are rolling out, and we have some very powerful legal minds running those, some of them for the administration, and I know there was quite a hubbub around Sidney Powell and everyone thinking that she got thrown out as a result of all this. But there's a bigger story there, and it looks like we have just 2 or 3 different streams of activity going on. So the cases do press forward, and a lot of interesting things are coming out of it. They're going to be crucial on this no matter what. I want to remind you that you're watching this Dark Journalist special report. We're going to go into National Security Action Memorandum 57, which has been activated by the Trump administration, and where it came from and what its purpose is. And this is just going to be a brief update. We'll try to go inside of 45 minutes here to get this to you, and we'll come back with our regularly scheduled program. Okay, so let's start with this. President Kennedy, as mentioned, when he got into office, realized basically that it was the CIA that was running the show. And he called in some of the first directors of the CIA, and General Beadle Smith, who had been the director. And he said, what's going on here and how do we get this back? Because right after the Bay of Pigs, where they almost single-handedly forced him to go in and invade Cuba just as soon as he got into office. And they were setting it up in that interim period, which is that same interim period that we're in now, which is before the next inauguration, but right after the election. And this is the period where they set it up, and it was actually a holdover from President Nixon, Vice President Nixon's planning. And they just thought, Kennedy's going to roll in here. We're going to take advantage of this situation. But there's an interesting thing about the deep state generally, which is they are overconfident, as we've seen on a number of occasions. And what ended up happening, which was quite fascinating, was, they were naming all these towns and buildings and all this stuff in Cuba, and they were just going to roll in there and have their way. But as it turned out, that didn't go the way that they wanted it to. And they have that kind of overconfidence you can see in so many aspects of the election steal that we've been watching here too. And as I said, regardless of which side of the political aisle that you fall down on, it's pretty obvious what's been happening there. The numbers switching, and Biden, who did not go out and campaign hardly at all, and hardly anyone showed up when he did. And easily, I can say from watching, many elections, and I'm sure many of you would, he had to be pretty much the worst presidential candidate we've ever seen. I don't think there's any, there's really, if you really go back there, maybe Dukakis. It would have to be neck and neck, but at least Dukakis really, was kind of sharp. This guy, they would roll him out for different events. He would get befuddled, just very unusual setup. And what he had was that machinery of the Democratic machine around him, and some of the more radical liberal elements like Kamala Harris, the VP. And they may have been thinking, we'll get this guy in and he's not going to make it through a first term, and we'll have this Kamala Harris. That could have been part of the plan. But in any case, as far as elections go, first of all, when you're the incumbent, you have a fantastic advantage going in, because you have the office of the presidency, and provided that you don't have, the Great Depression or a hostage crisis or those types of things that would make a one-term president, you pretty much get in. I mean, everybody, with the exception of George H.W. Bush, who was facing, people were really had Reagan-Bush fatigue, and he'd really kind of blown it with the Gulf War in the aftermath of that, with the economy sinking. So that was the last first-term president that we had, and the one before that was Jimmy Carter, and he had the hostage crisis. So those things kind of make sense. When you get to this, it really doesn't, because Trump, as we can say just now, we got the biggest Dow Jones numbers. His economy was going great, except for the COVID thing, which either president, you'd handle it pretty much the same way economically, even if you'd have a different approach on the healthcare front. So we're looking at something unusual here. This is an unusual step. It's almost like if you can go back to 1984 and Reagan didn't get reelected, you could say, what would have happened? So we're in that kind of what if phase of looking at everything. And there is a lot of, we really have to say that the situation has been interrupted, and that the re-election of Trump, which is what we've been looking at, they have tried to step in and use various amounts of voter fraud to get the election overturned to Biden. So we're looking at a real splintered situation. And when you have so much Trump support in the country, this really was an extraordinary move on the deep state's part to get back in business, because regardless of where you stand on him, Trump certainly was interrupting a great deal of what the traditional establishment was all about, which was kissing up to China and having the empire, American empire, and all these foreign wars. So this is the nature of what we were looking at. So I'm going to remind you to go to darkjournalist.com and sign up for our newsletter, by the way, because I've been seeing, and a lot of you have been great enough to send me this really fantastic screenshots of YouTube asking you to sign in to confirm your age on my material now. So that's interesting. I think that they're doing all kinds of interesting things to get people off of watching this kind of content. And we've expected it. The best way for us to kind of do an end run around all that is for you guys to sign up at darkjournalist.com and to really, just take advantage of the free newsletter there. What happens basically is you'll get it about once a week in your inbox. There's no marketing or anything serious in there, just the shows that are coming up and the incredible guests that we have coming up for you. So make sure that you do that, because we don't know what's going on. And I do hear and appreciate all the things that you guys send over. Another thing I want to mention, when it comes to oddness around videos, my recent video that I put out, which had my original documentary on JFK called Agent Oswald, and the other one, which is the one I just did this summer, which is X Protect UFO File Assassins, which has a huge Kennedy section in it, and it's all about CIA manipulation on that. That one has been blocked in Vatican City. And I'm going to tweet this out for everyone to look at, because it's quite an unusual thing to do if you think about it, to just pick out one particular place. And of all places, Vatican City, why wouldn't they want the video there? So there's no real good explanation for it. I actually have been trying to compare it with other people and saying, have you ever had anything banned in Vatican City? And it comes up a great big no. So we're looking at something unusual there, no question about it. But in any case, that's all clear. So we're going to jump into Kennedy's NSAM 55, 56, and 57, and then get a flavor for what it's all about. This is actually a shot of President Kennedy signing the National Security Action Memorandum Order. And basically, the way that Fletcher Prouty describes it, who was the liaison officer between the CIA and the Pentagon during the Kennedy era, and he is the guy who was sent to Antarctica, of all places, while this was happening, while the assassination was taking place. So they didn't want him around for any kind of security purposes, but he went back because he was such a main player, and he looked at a number of circumstances. And what he ended up doing was looking at that NSAM 57 and realizing, oh, this was the one. And he remembers when he gave it to the Joint Chiefs, which is something that Kennedy asked him to do. He said, go around the CIA and go directly to the Joint Chiefs with this order. A couple of things I'm going to quote from his book, which is called The Secret Team. And this is very important, I think, when we look at Prouty, because he's somebody who was there in the machinery. And a lot of people have asked who have just discovered this and who I've been introducing it to since it happened, because it was one of those things that the Trump administration did, and then they didn't really talk about it. It was just there and it's done. But one of the things that I've been pointing out is people say, why didn't somebody use it before? You know, and the question is very interesting, but even Kennedy wasn't able to implement it at the time. So we have to kind of think about that and realize, you know, something was going on in the background there. Here's the explanation from Colonel Fletcher Prouty in relation to National Security Action Memorandum 57, which I just want to say, basically, what it does, it gives the president the ability for special ops to report directly to the Secretary of Defense, and it cuts the CIA out of the loop. You can find the order. This is another thing that I wanted to point out, because people have said, well, how do we know there was such an order? It's very easy. All the National Security Action Memorandums are laid out there in the Library of Congress. But at the JFK Library, they have a record of all the National Security Action Memorandums that he signed. And 55, 56, and 57 are the ones. 55 and 57, particularly the ones that cut the CIA out of the loop and return them back to their original position, which is what they were cut out for in 1947, which Harry Truman set them up to be an intelligence gathering entity, and they took it upon themselves to go into covert ops. And then there were aspects around, there were different aspects that were flying between intelligence and the military. And those groups were called the Office of Policy Coordination, the OPC, and they were really good at covert ops, but they weren't accountable. So Truman instantly told the leaders of the CIA, get those guys under control and fast and make it happen and get back to me. And what it appears happened over time is that people like Allen Dulles, as I pointed out on a number of shows, the CIA director there, whose brother was the Secretary of State, he basically used them as an arm of his business interests, because he was a lawyer at Sullivan and Cromwell. And Allen Dulles, had that force and influence as the CIA director to really invent a whole new form of government. And this is what he did. But the problem was it became more and more out of the reach of presidential control. And that's how we got the problems, especially through Kennedy. But it was already happening in Eisenhower's period. So Kennedy puts together a plan, which is NSAM 57. And in NSAM 57, it says, you basically can go directly with special ops and the military and the CIA in a support position. So no longer can the CIA initiate its own covert ops. They can't go there and overthrow the president of Guatemala. They can't take out Mossadegh in Iran. You know, they'd done so many things that were just on their own initiative. And so this was a new era that Kennedy was bringing in. So one of the things that happened is, when he sent the memo over to the Joint Chiefs, they were so shocked. They realized this means war with the CIA. What are we going to do here? And so some of this is what Prouty describes, because he was the one who delivered the order directly to General Lemnitzer. So I'm just going to read a little bit from his book here. And again, it's called The Secret Team. It's an excellent book and a real good kind of first-hand witness. Of course, Colonel Prouty is no longer with us, but he left an incredible legacy. Okay, so here's what he says. We had not seen what had happened to the National Security Action Memorandum 55. The memo Kennedy had sent directly to General Lemnitzer. The general filed that memo and used its silent power to assure that the military would not become involved in covert operations. As Maxwell Taylor became the chairman, he inherited this power as a prime mover of the inner and security-cloaked secret team. He now had the scepter of greater power in his hands, whereas the president had called upon the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff to advise him in peacetime, as he would in wartime. Now he had appointed an advisor who was with the other side. The CIA knew that Taylor would not advise against them any more than Lansdale and Bundy would up in Robert McNamara's office. That's the defense secretary. Therefore, with the move of Maxwell Taylor to the chairmanship of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the secret team had checkmated President Kennedy on both National Security Action Memorandum 55 and National Security Action Memorandum 57. This is what happened. So Kennedy puts these forward. He gives it directly to the military, but the committee that's going to implement it has CIA infiltrators on it, and it gets blocked. But it's hanging out there. It's an official order. Even though they don't implement it, it's there. So this kind of point, when you look at it, someone in that Trump White House, either Trump himself or acting Defense Secretary Christopher Miller or Ezra Cohen Watnick, one of these people knew that that order was there and they executed it. And it is the change that takes place as a result is dizzying. We'll see. Everyone, you're watching the Dark Journalist Show. It's just a brief update to keep us all in the loop about National Security Action Memorandum 57, which the president has activated as of November 18th. There's also some very strange moves along the election line that have been going on behind the scenes. We're going to just go with you here for about another 30 minutes or so, and I'll try to grab a few questions at the end too. We have a great crowd out there, and one of the things I want to get into, I'm going to read a little more from Prouty's work on this, so we have a little more context. So now he's going further into it. And he said, okay, the whole secret team, that is basically the CIA deep state aspect. The whole secret team that built a totally unexpected and totally unplanned operation out of the smaller, more nearly clandestine units that might have had some measure of success. Kennedy felt and did know that such clandestine operations had no place in the US government. In other words, you know, these little marauding jobs of these groups of, say, 10 or 20 guys going in and sabotaging facilities, you know, setting fire to crop fields, you know, sabotaging enemy artillery, whatever it would happen to be. If those things got out of hand, they could set off World War III. And Kennedy was looking at it and also saying, we have all these operations in Southeast Asia, Laos, Vietnam, and all the rest, but here close to home we have Cuba. If they go in there and they're doing that, then we're really going to have problems. So he's looking to implement something to block this runaway CIA influence. Therefore, Kennedy did feel and did know that such clandestine operations had no place in the US government. This led him to direct the publication of the most important of these memorandums, National Security Action Memo number 57. Number 57 was a long paper as these things go, and we shall make no attempt to recall all the details. When the Pentagon Papers series was published in the New York Times, it was noticeable for its omission of National Security Action Memorandum 57. This was the big secret. Nobody wanted this out there because it basically defanged the CIA. And the CIA at that point had become largely a law unto itself. So we were looking at a very interesting situation there, because the CIA was controlling the media by feeding them stories, and everyone in the media thinks they're in the loop, but they're also in that echelon of power. And the CIA is talking to world leaders and saying, we're the real government here, talk to us. You know, it's recalled that during Jimmy Carter's presidency, Henry Kissinger, in conversation with foreign leaders, was saying, you don't need to talk to the president. I basically am the president. So going far beyond the office itself. Kissinger, most notably, has been seen kissing up recently with Vice President Biden. And so these guys think the old boy network is back now, and they may be in for a few surprises. Okay, so what we had was National Security Action Memorandum, NSAM 57, responsibility for paramilitary operations, signed off on by President Kennedy and activated by acting Secretary of Defense on November 18th, Christopher Miller. Miller just got in after Trump fired Esper, so we have to kind of watch the dots and follow along as we go. One of the things that Kennedy was trying to do was remove the influence of people like the CIA Director Dulles, because he saw them as planning overseas operations and assassinations, as eventually they would, in fact, assassinate the leaders of Vietnam. But this whole machinery of assassination eventually got turned on Kennedy because he was trying to snuff it out. And in doing that, he was snuffing out a worldwide global power that was already established since the end of World War II. And of course, we've done some shows on this, the shows with Dr. Joseph Farrell and with Professor Peter Dale Scott about how the CIA came to be the entity that it was. And make no mistake that they learned a great deal after World War II from General Galen's network in Nazi Germany. And that kind of Gestapo approach was exactly what President Truman was trying to avoid. But President Truman only got into office after being VP for 3 months. And he had only been a senator in Missouri. He was not really worldly wise. And he had been used as a puppet, even back in Missouri, by a machine. And they had been kind of moving him along the whole way, making him a judge, you know, running him for Senate and all these things, where he actually, in his own upbringing, I mean, he hadn't even gone to college. Which is quite remarkable that he accomplished all the things that he did. Of course, a lot of people who don't go to college accomplish great things, but it's interesting to me to think about Truman coming into office this way and just facing these incredible obstacles. So a little more from the secret team here. This is, again, Prouty. Therefore, with the move of Maxwell Taylor to the chairmanship of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the secret team, the CIA, had checkmated President Kennedy on both National Security Action Memorandum 55, which sets up 57, and National Security Action Memorandum 57. And the country moved into the crucial summer of 1963. The president admitted to his closest confidants that he could not move against the right-wingers and the secret team. He told Senator Mansfield, "I can't do it until 1965 after I'm reelected. I can't activate NSAM 57. It's sitting there. He's written it. It has the authority, but he can't get behind it. He can't go to bat and really go to war with the CIA. He's thinking, as soon as I'm reelected, I'll let everything really loose. And also, he's pulling the troops out of Vietnam at that point as well. And he's already come through triumphantly through the Cuban Missile Crisis after facing down Soviet leadership on this. So it's really quite remarkable. Now, what's going on in the background is we've seen that Trump has had this problem with the national security apparatus since he got in. And when we think about this, we have to remember that Trump is coming in as a real outsider politically. He may be an insider on the business front, but he has his own very interesting background, as I've pointed out on this program on a number of occasions, including the fact that he was very close with President Nixon. When President Nixon had moved back to the East Coast and was in New Jersey and New York, and Trump was trying to get him to live in Trump Tower, and Nixon was trying to get him to run for president. And they were doing fundraisers together, and there's a whole rich conversation that we reported on this program in 2018, and then voila, in 2020, the letters come out. They just came out in October, as a matter of fact, showing that real deep, previously unknown relationship. And the only reason that we told you about it here, it's not that I want to say that, you know, this is such a great thing that we found. It was there, and we did point it out. But I want to put across that Trump had those fantastic connections, and that's something that's crucial for us to understand. And I have to also say that Trump is not someone who is on the world stage. You know, he has such a deep understanding that he has kind of his own intelligence network, I guess you could look at it. But he never had a cozy relationship with the CIA the way Obama did. You know, CIA basically sponsored Obama as they had sponsored Clinton beforehand. And we already know the Bushes are so close because, you know, Daddy Bush was a CIA director in the 70s and had been really close with the CIA all the way back to the Bay of Pigs era, which was nicknamed Zapata, which was the name of Bush's oil company. I mean, this is a matter of public record. So now we know. So what do we do with all that information? This is the big question. That switch out of National Security Action Memorandum being activated is something that Trump and his circle decided we can do this, because if we announced now that we were writing an executive order changing everything that was going on in relation to how the Pentagon operates special ops to the CIA, that would be a totally different thing. But for this, it's a little bit different, because all they have to do is say, this is activated now. It's already on the books. We don't have to go through that process of saying, we're creating this new thing, because in that period between the election and the new inauguration, you're not really supposed to change policy all that much, especially if the outcome of the election is uncertain. So we're looking at an interesting situation there where they needed to find something in order to accomplish this, moving the Central Intelligence Agency out of the picture of a lead role as they have now. Now, look, the Central Intelligence Agency, what they're good at are swinging elections. Okay, this is what they've been doing since 1948. It's one of the reasons they were created, was to, supposedly the Vatican called in the CIA in 1948, and they went over there, and that's where so many of these, the mafia connection with the CIA came about, because they wanted to block supposedly the communists from getting in. It's just really that they wanted the continuity going on there. Now, one of the things I want to say that I think is important for us to keep in mind is when you're looking at the CIA, they've been so out of hand all this period of time, but particularly when Trump gets in, instantly they're against him. John Brennan comes out, the CIA director, the drone king under Obama, and he opposes Trump publicly, which is a very strange thing for a CIA director to do. And he goes on MSNBC, and they give him a paid job to just sit there and blather on about Trump this, Trump that. He's a threat. He's colluding with Russia. He's, all this nonsense, which they spent $50 million on and couldn't find a damn thing. Then James Clapper, the director of national intelligence under Obama, with all of his CIA connections. Both of these guys have lied to Congress, by the way, and has been cited for it. But he is hell-bent against him. And then all these CIA officials, and you wonder, what is it that's going on here? It's because if somebody comes in who's an outsider to that system, what they'll see is that the CIA is basically running everything. They have their own Air Force. They're budgeted billions of dollars every year. They have their own drone programs. They have their own kind of map of national security. So if you really want to do your own foreign policy, you're going to have to get those guys in check. And, Trump wound up with Gina Haspel, which is a weird choice. We'll get back to that. But she comes out of the Bush era, and she's known as Bloody Gina because she's so associated with the torture program. And I can't imagine for the life of me where that advice came from. But there she was. And before that, he also had Mike Pompeo in as CIA director, who is now Secretary of State. And they're saying, oh, he's going to run for office someday. All I can say is hopefully not. Everyone, you're watching the Dark Journalist Show. This is a special update on some X episode stuff that we've been doing. And it's a great crowd. I'm going to try to grab a few of your questions at the end here. I'm just going to go a little longer to try to get into a few things that are going on. Because I mentioned X there, I want to just mention that some of the things that are going on with the voting, the media would have you believe, basically from election night, that this is all over, and it's for Biden. And I'm not saying that we know how the outcome is going to go, but it's ridiculous. Nobody, as I've pointed out with the True Map, nobody has 270 electoral votes in this election yet. This is a very important thing for us to keep in mind. It is really up in the air, and it depends on a lot of the cases about voter fraud in these states, from Pennsylvania to Georgia. And that map, basically Pennsylvania, Georgia, Arizona, and Wisconsin now, 150,000 votes. The ballot count upload error in Arizona now has over 6,000 false Biden votes that were discovered. Now, this is a state that only had a 10,000 vote margin, and already that was looking weird. But now it's down to 4,000. You're telling me the separation of 4,000 votes in a state, Arizona, which has always gone red since 1996. Okay, the last time anyone got it was Clinton in 96. It's basically a red state for the last 25 years. And Biden, who does not, is not a very exciting candidate, supposedly he did what Obama couldn't do, and he swung the state red, from red to blue. I don't think so. So there's a lot of weird things like that, but now we see those numbers collapsing. So when you get within the range of 4,000 votes, it could go either way. So that state is still in play. Now, in Wisconsin, there's another weird situation. I'm just going to cover a few election things here briefly. But group files emergency petition in Wisconsin after finding 150,000 potentially fraudulent ballots. Think about that. That's just the news. This is really remarkable what we're seeing. The election is so up in the air, but the media has really doubled down from their position, and they've created this very artificial thought form of entrainment for us to keep going into. The election's over, we can't help it, Biden's in. What you want to do is find out what's going on with all these states and all their votes. And also, if votes get certified, everything gets certified on December 14th, you basically have that window of about 3 weeks to shake this stuff out. And if it goes to court, all hands, on deck, especially, if it goes to Supreme Court, all these other things are already in court. So we have to keep that in mind about what's happening. One of the things, since we study steganography on the show, as you know, did you know that Dominion software, what they actually use and what we're actually looking into and what so much of the fraud has been questioned on is actually their ImageCast X software. Now, anyone who follows the program knows that over and over again, these programs that have the X steganography are involved with advanced technology in these groups that operate in the background. So seeing that they're using this ImageCast X, obviously people are doing outstanding research now on Dominion and getting to the bottom of it. And what's interesting is even traditional media used to have a real big problem with the electronic voting and looked into Dominion and others, even as much as they're saying that Sidney Powell is a conspiracy theorist and all this kind of wild stuff about her now. I did want to say that in relation to Sidney Powell, that this is somebody who has an incredible track record on that really major level of Supreme Court activity, federal court activity. She has actually swung the decision of 70 major cases from where they were to a different result. So this is somebody who is a very deep legal operator, and everything that she said so far has made a lot of sense. She hasn't shared all of her evidence, but this is not the kind of thing a lawyer will do until they're in court. And one of those cases is going live tomorrow, just before Thanksgiving. So we're going to be hearing more about what's going on there. There's been all this stuff about release the Kraken, and she put that out there. Obviously, she feels that she has something quite extraordinary and quite major. All of the people over at Fox, we already know that MSNBC and CNN and all that junk, they already were against her from the start and would have done anything so that somebody like her wouldn't be looking into this. But when Fox really started to get into it, and now with their new wave of Geraldo Rivera saying, let's just move on and everything. Well, fine. What you want to do is get to the bottom of it on a news level. That's what you do. The political process, even the president now has gone forward with the GSA. So there's a potential transition that will happen if the votes all shake out that way. But if you're a reporter, what you want to do is get to the bottom of it, and you want to see if it was manipulated, and you want to make sure you get to the right answers for your readers. So why are all these people on board with the fraud? These are the types of things that we need to look at. Okay, and that's a map of the states under litigation there again. Just to keep in mind that these are cases that are going on. We don't know how they're going to shake out. That's the real truth. Everyone, you're watching the Dark Journalist Show. It's great to be with you here, just doing a brief update on some of these things about JFK National Security Action Memorandum 57, which the Trump administration activated on Wednesday, November 18th, to through the acting Secretary of Defense, Christopher Miller. It's a very important story. We did a 3-hour episode on it Friday, which I highly recommend. but I'm just kind of covering a little bit of the points and giving a little more context as we go. By the way, that's that X voting machine. It's like X Nintendo, really, if you get into it. That is something really, I think, as we move along here, the X aspect going in here is quite fascinating. One of the things I've been reporting on, which is a wild card, is some of the way that they've been portraying Trump in the media, which I think is so interesting. They keep showing him with the back of his head to the camera over and over again. And they started this even before the election. That's what's weird. Here's one, and this one actually was before the election. There's that shot of Trump in Georgia during a campaign stop. They have this shot of him from the back. And then again, the Drudge Report, stocks soar on Trump exit. Yeah, Trump gets this incredible record, and they're like, oh, it's all because people want him to exit. I don't think so. Trump was doing very well with the economy. Everyone needs to agree on that because it's the truth. It doesn't matter if you're a Democrat or Republican or Libertarian. Trump was doing well with the economy until the lockdown mania and Fauci and all that nonsense. All right, there we go again. Trump from the back of the head. It's a really strange pattern. I put up a series on Twitter about it. There's about 6 images up there. Yahoo News, The Atlantic. You have to wonder what that's all about. And I think the image is on the creepy side. And I think it also falls outside the bounds of professional journalism. You know, it's one of those things. It's like showing a target on somebody or something. It really should be discouraged. And if I was the Secret Service, I think I'd go and I'd talk to some of those editors and say, what's going on here? There's another piece here, which I think is very odd, and it's a story that's been coming up. And you know, on this program, we watch the UFO file story very closely as it relates to advanced technology, secret technology, all types of questions about aliens and UFOs. It's all right there in the UFO file. We've gone deep on this and tried to treat the subject in a way. It was really strange. One of the things that came up when Sidney Powell had, you know, basically got dressed down by Tucker Carlson, and he came out and he was doing all this bravado. And I've always wondered about his show picking up on alternative media ideas. And I have to say, you know, it's always nice to see those things talked about, but it has to cross your mind that they're just kind of going for market share. And when we see that happen, it's very highly disturbing. And so he came out, when he came out against Powell, there was no reason to do it. And she said that he was rude behind the scenes, and I believe it. But one of the things he said in the middle of his defense, he's like, you know, oh, we cover UFOs. Like, we even go into that subject. So we're open-minded here. You know, and it was like this weird thing, you know, it's like he doesn't know anything about UFOs. And to be bragging about it, again, it struck me that somebody had sat down with somebody like Carlson and said, you know, marketing-wise, we need to get into this, different things, pick up on different stories, which is why they sit there with CIA people like Luis Elizondo, and as if they're going to get the truth from guys like that. All right, but here's an interesting story. Trump may block public from learning the truth about UFOs. This is just from today. It's very odd, and particularly odd in the sense that it's Popular Mechanics that is putting out the story. Popular Mechanics has suddenly developed this huge interest in UFOs, as the New York Times has, and we've seen these weird stories kind of plug along as we go. So what they basically say, with one veto, the president could prevent the Pentagon from disclosing findings on unidentified aerial phenomena. President Donald Trump is threatening to veto a defense bill that includes language directing a government task force to investigate and disclose information about unidentified aerial phenomena, UAP, which is the new fake term for UFOs, also known as unidentified flying objects. Why didn't you say so in the first place? So we have an interesting thing going on there. And all I want to say about it is Trump is deep in the UFO file. His uncle was sponsored and was the protege of Vannevar Bush, who was the dean of MIT. and according to physicist Robert Sarbarker, in charge of the UFO file. So his uncle knew that. His uncle was sent in by Vannevar Bush and the FBI to study Tesla's papers, looking for information relating to taking flying objects down and death rays and things of that nature. But this whole thing about flying objects is there in John Trump's background. We have to kind of keep that in mind when we're looking at Trump. We're looking at something much more complicated and multidimensional than the kind of punchline you get in Saturday Night Live about, Trump was just some guy who's against immigration. There are deep, deep tentacles to this story. And when you look at it in that context, and then you think about the acting defense secretary telling special ops to report directly to him, it gets to be very interesting, especially when you get people like Marco Rubio talking about the UFO threat. And it makes you wonder, with them bringing this story up, one of the things that Trump tried to get back under presidential control also, which has been largely under CIA control, is the UFO file. However you want to size that up, as advanced technology, alien technology, Tesla technology, X technology, the UFO file is a reality in those circles. So therefore, when we're looking at this, we have to kind of go a couple of levels deeper to see what's happening. This story about Trump blocking with a veto that information from coming out seems to me more crisscrossing, more shots across the bow on this major UFO issue that's going on. And with the Space Force, genuinely, I think the Trump administration was trying to pull that UFO knowledge back under presidential control, as President Kennedy was doing as well. So we see a lot of crisscross here in the JFK administration and the Trump administration, and a lot of the same problems. On the Clinton side, coming in 2016, she was there with the To the Stars Academy people, Podesta, Tom DeLonge, and Elizondo, and all that. That's another wing trying to pull the UFO file to themselves. So that's where the struggle is. But when you see these stories coming up, I think it is quite remarkable. So we're going to be diving deep into all of this as we go along, but keep in mind that since the order is active, we don't know how it's going to play out, but that's a major move on Trump's part to activate the National Security Action Memorandum 57. So there we are. It's been great to be with you. I'm going to do a couple of shout outs here just to say hello to everyone. And I appreciate you coming in for my brief lecture and update on all this. We're going to be coming back with the X series, and we have some exciting things coming up for you, some great interviews. Also, make sure you go to darkjournalist.com and sign up for our newsletter, because that's where we're going to be having that information for you tonight. It's great to have everyone out there. Scarlet Fire, Indiana Joe, Kimberly, Astro Boy, Fubar Fighter, terrific to see you, sir. T. Jordan, Najat, excellent to see you out there. So much information, I think, really good information flowing out there. Do not let the mainstream media knocking Sidney Powell shake you up on her. She's a really rock. So the more that I get into her information and her background, one of the things I revealed on Friday was that she has this incredible background around the JFK investigation, the JFK assassination investigation, and that she actually prosecuted one of the hitmen accused of, he had shot a judge, which is what she prosecuted him for, but he was one of the people, Charles Harrelson, who had been accused of being one of the tramps in Dealey Plaza who had helped arrange for the assassination. So there's something really interesting, and the more we get into this, JFK keeps popping up. As a matter of fact, Speaker Pelosi, of all people, Nancy Pelosi, was out there saying, Biden has such a mandate. He has the mandate that JFK had, which is ridiculous. Biden could barely speak when he was showing up at drive-ins, and there were 12 people there. It was quite remarkable. And so everything that's in play there, we're going to give very serious attention to. But I'm watching the legal cases around the election. That's really where I'm keeping kind of hawkeye right now, because I think there's something pretty major going on there behind the scenes. So remember to go to darkjournalist.com. Also, I appreciate it when YouTube tells you you need to log in, age verify, and things like that. I want to hear about all those things because I think there's a number of tactics that are going on out there. Starlight, it's great to see you. Lady Zaga, Titan Blooded, fantastic. We saw a cult fan out there earlier. Always great to see the X crowd in the ideas room. Leandra, it's great to see you. Jennifer Ann, Bo Krills, it's great to see you, sir. Glad to have you back. J Doe, Plan D. It's a really great crowd tonight. I don't know. It looks like the moderator was swimming in and out of there. Maybe we probably didn't even need one tonight. We just had the great crowd in there tonight. Irie A, terrific to see you. We will be back this weekend with some very important updates and special interviews coming up as well. And I also want to mention that, you know, X100 is coming up, and that episode is going to happen in December, but it'll be a great two-part accumulation of all the things we've done there in the X series. And it's so interesting because you will find Trump and JFK crisscrossing throughout that series. So it's very interesting to have Trump during this stressful period after the election activating the National Security Action Memorandum. It's just off the charts. We will keep you posted on it and all of the legal wranglings going on. And I would say Sidney Powell, one to watch for sure. We will see you all this weekend. Have a great Thanksgiving. And I'm very happy to be here with you. Breach, it's really great to see you out there, sir. David Fierce, Oregon MAGA, that's terrific. M. Leland, Sandra Sword, I saw Kate out there. Carl Young, excellent to see everyone. We will see you all this weekend and have a very safe and happy and crowded Thanksgiving. I hope it's a good time, and we will see you all very soon. And you know, it says end broadcasts, but after all, it never really ends, as we know. It's always great to see you. Maxim Rice, great to see you, sir. Deborah Sloan. Have a great night, everyone.